Hello and welcome back. I am the Drag Detective, and today we are going to be discussing an older season of Drag Race UK Season 1. Season 3 just started. We are currently 2 episodes in, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to go back and cover a season I have not gotten to yet. I hadn't rewatched this season since it aired, but I binged it all in a day and a half for this video, and damn, did I forget, like, a lot. What I didn't forget was just how incredible of a season it was. The heroes, the villains, the drama, the friendships, the season-long story arcs, everything that makes a good season was there. And RuPaul's first official venture into international waters was a grand success. But, like I always say, no good season is that good without a little bit of Riggory. Now, I actually forgot a lot of the more unfair moments of the season, so I got upset all over again watching it back this time. So I cannot wait to talk about some of these wild, truly wild decisions that were made throughout the season. They don't come like super often like in some other seasons, but when they do happen, it's like, whoa, what the bloody hell just happened on my telly? Okay, I promise no more of my terrible British accent. I think I just got it out of my system. As we always do, we're going to break down each episode, bringing to light the storylines at play and how those storylines may have affected the judging and the decisions that were made by Ru. But first, make sure you are subscribed to the Drag Detective channel. Let's get me to 30K. I think we can do it before the end of the year. Let's do it by Halloween. That'd be great. Also, make sure you are following me on my Instagram and my Twitter. I promise I will be more active on there. Also, make sure you check out the Patreon if you are able to. We have a couple fun contests happening and stuff like that. So those are all of my socials. That's all the stuff I got to get to. Now we can get into the season. Now, towards the end of the season, I realized something that I didn't necessarily think of before. This season is literally Mean Girls. Hear me out. We have our Katie Heron, Miss Divina de Campo, the relatable, kind, sweet viewpoint character for this story, who ends up becoming just like the catty girls she doesn't like towards the end of the season. Then, of course, we need our plastics. The Vivienne, of course, is Regina George. Powerful, beautiful, confident, thinks she's better than everyone, and willing to do whatever it takes to win. Bag of Chips is our Gretchen Wieners, a loyal friend to the Vivienne, very maybe unaware of how she comes across at times, somewhat careless with her words, but also can be a sympathetic and lovable person. And then Vinegar Strokes is our Karen. Not as close as the other two are, but still vibes with them regardless. And then after Vinegar leaves, Crystal, I think, somewhat fills this role. But then we have Cheryl as our Janice and Blue as our Damien. Cheryl can be a bit of a mean girl too at times, but she has a heart of gold and is the sympathetic figure to the audience. Blue is always around, but is never the main focus. She's just a fun person to watch on screen. Now, those are the main queens of the season, and it's kind of wild to me how well that metaphor works. It's kind of eerily accurate and makes me wonder if the editors may have had some inspiration. Maybe they had a movie night and they're like, wait, let's try something. But no, it's just a funny little metaphor. But I thought it was kind of interesting, and it helped me to kind of pick apart the story arcs of this season a little easier. So let's dive into the season and we can flesh out the storylines a little bit more. So episode 1 is the British Ball. Actually, it's not called that, but I think that was a missed opportunity. The queens have to serve a look based on their hometown and then a second look inspired by the queen. No, not this queen. No, not that one either. This queen. Okay, so I love that in Drag Race UK we get this little mini ball every premiere. I think it's a great way to learn the drag styles of these queens and find out more about them. It's kind of like a low risk challenge. I mean, you're literally just going to wear clothes you brought from home, so more time can be spent on getting to know everyone rather than on the challenge itself. And we see a lot of queens knock both of their looks out of the park. The Vivienne, Divina, Something, Blue, Crystal, and Scaredy all serve two great looks on the runway, in my opinion. So there's a lot of options here for who to put in the top. And they choose the Vivienne, Something, and Baga. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to the Bag of Chips Favoritism Hour. We're gonna see lots of classic favorites, like saving Baga from the bottom two, putting Baga in the top for no reason whatsoever, and carrying her all the way to top three. So strap on your seatbelts, we're going to be in for a bumpy and rigged ride. In all honesty, neither of Baga's looks in this episode were bad. They were both fine, average, simple, maybe a little unoriginal. But there are queens like Blue Hydrangea, Crystal, Divina, and Scaredy Cat taking big risks on some of their looks, and for the most part, they all paid off. So seeing these two looks be deemed top-worthy, while all these looks were deemed safe, let's just say the alarms were ringing already. I know this game far too well by now. So, yeah, if there's a queen that producers really want the viewers to grow attached to and be on their radar right off the bat, they put them in the top episode 1. It's great exposure, it's a great start to their journey, to the final 3 usually, and that's exactly what I think happened with Baga Chips here. It's no mystery why Baga was immediately a production favorite. Her confessionals were all gold, she's a major presence in the workroom, and she's not afraid to give the producers exactly what they need from her to make a fun and exciting piece of television. And here's the thing, I think Baga's presence on the season definitely was a major reason why the season was so good. She was always causing trouble, always had interesting storylines going on, and was a standout on this cast. So I cannot knock production for rigging things in her favor like they did, but I can still call it out. This is the Riggory of Drag Race UK after all, and Baga's name is going to pop up a lot. So let me just warn you about that right now. Another figure I want to talk about from this episode is the Vivienne herself. We learn right away that the Vivienne is the UK's drag ambassador because she won some sort of like random pageant thing, and a lot of fans used this as the reason why Viv won the season. Now, you'll have to wait and see as the video progresses if I agree with this statement or not. But what I will say is that even small little interactions with Ru, like Vivienne had winning that pageant, is somewhat of an advantage. A lot of these queens are total strangers to both Ru and production. But that one moment of clout that Viv got is a big deal and immediately sets her apart from the other queens here. But we will get back to this later. For now, Vivienne totally deserved her win in this episode, and basically every other placement besides Baga, I totally agree with. So we have Vinegar Strokes and Gothy Kendall in the bottom 2. Vinegar is established as a friend to Michelle Visage, and Michelle tells her on the runway she won't be getting any special treatment. And she wasn't lying. I've talked about this before on the channel, the concept of best possible and worst possible track records. And Vinegar got the worst possible track record. That just means that every time she did bad enough to be in the bottom, she was. Gothy, on the other hand, is kind of set up throughout the episode as a young queen who's still kind of insecure about herself, unsure about her choices in the competition, and it's pretty obvious that compared to everyone else on this cast, who are all confident and self-assured, Gothy stood out as the one queen lacking in those departments, and that actually ends up being her downfall. Her meek runway performances and her safe looks land her in the bottom, and her meekness continues in the lip sync. So that leads us into our second episode, Downton Draggy, the acting challenge. Now, I agree with every choice made by production in this episode, but there are still some moments I want to highlight that sort of made me raise my eyebrow a little bit. The first is how iconic that mini challenge was. Basically, Vivienne has to order all of the girls from best to worst, and wow, does this ignite some shit. Vivienne's two biggest rivals on the season are Cheryl and Divina, and both of those storylines start here. Divina is pissed because she wasn't put first, and Cheryl is pissed because she was almost put last. This just proves to me how genius Vivienne is. She really put some solid strategy into these choices. She put queens like Divina and Something lower than they probably deserved based on their performances in the first episode to kind of knock them down a peg and possibly throw them off their game. And then she put Scaredy Cat last, setting her up to go home later this episode. So let's talk about Scaredy. She's 19, she just started drag, she's never performed before, but she already killed that first episode. She won the first mini challenge, and both her looks for the ball were out of the box, conceptual, and well executed. There was no reason for Viv to put her last here, except to reinforce the fact that because she's so new, no one is going to see her as a threat, no matter how well she smashed that first episode. So she becomes a team captain in this episode, and Vivienne is the other. Now, Vivienne chooses her other members of the Plastics and Something, and then Scaredy is left with everyone else. I mean, come on, right off the bat, it's obvious which team is going to excel in this acting challenge. Another weird moment in this episode is during the walkthroughs with Ru. So RuPaul calls out Blue Hydrangea for flying under the radar. And I was so confused because it's literally been one episode and Blue is safe, but had some of the best looks of the night. So how can you fly under the radar in a single episode that you did well in? This really felt like they were setting Blue up to either sink or swim in this episode, and, well, we all know how she did. So, hearing things like that, I think can really get a queen in her head, and I think that we see that happen with Blue in this episode. It was just really, random. We didn't see her tell this to Crystal or to Divina or to any of the other queens who were safe last episode. So why did she need to call out Blue like that? But the challenge happens, and some of these roles are rough, to say the least. Especially the roles that end up in the bottom two. I'm not sure how Scaredy or Blue could have amped their roles up. I mean, did they portray them well? No. But I'm not sure anybody could. Blue's role was basically the less interesting maid, and having to go up next to Divina, who was the other maid role, was a lot, especially because Divina's role was so much better written, and it was kind of inevitable she was going to be overshadowed. And then Scaredy gets the whiny princess role, and Michelle tells her that the role needed more layers. But based on the script, there were no other layers to be had. There was nothing for her to bring out of that character. Now, not every role can be a winning role, but we've seen some queens in the past acting challenges spin gold out of a crappy part. But seeing these two in the bottom together was not shocking based on the material that they were given. Also, can we talk about this Bond girl runway? I feel like half these queens just picked something out of their closets and somehow made it fit. I mean, how do any of these read as Bond girl? And then you had queens like Scaredy, Crystal, and Divina knock it out of the park on the runway, yet they were in the losing group. So Scaredy Cat goes home. Honestly, I was really sad. I wanted to see more from her. She had so much potential, and some of her runways that we didn't get to see were iconic. Like, look at these. But I think they were really pushing the inexperienced queens are going to flop on Drag Race narrative for both her and for Gothie, so it does make sense narratively why we see her leave here. Now, episode 3, yikes. So this was the design challenge. I'm just going to say it. Baga was 1000% saved from lip syncing in this episode. Tace uses these same, like, scrubber things the following season and is read and put in the bottom for the look being simple. But hers is, like, miles better than Baga's, so yeah, I really feel bad for Something here. She basically gets buried in the edit these next 2 episodes for not listening to other people's advice, and the narrative is heavily pushed by Vivienne, who mentions it about 1,000 times these 2 episodes. Now, Something took a risk by using blinds to make a suit jacket, but damn, she did it well. Did it look completely finished? No. But she put in a lot more effort than some of these queens did in their looks, namely Baga and Cheryl. So it just sucks seeing her lip sync, honestly. So we see a tight race between Divina and Crystal this episode for the win. Divina tells us all the way back in episode 1 that looks are not her thing, but she knows she's going to have to step up her fashion in order to keep up with this new generation of drag. Crystal tells us from the start that she makes all of her looks and her aesthetic is the most important part of her drag. So right off the bat, Crystal is set up to slay this episode, and I think we're meant to kind of worry about Divina. So when both of their looks are absolute smashes, and either of them could have won, Divina getting the win here is just a more satisfying conclusion. After her breakdown in episode 2, where she cries on the main stage about her feeling like she isn't doing as well as she wants to be, seeing her come back so strong this episode and knock it out of the park is just a great story arc. Crystal, on the other hand, honestly doesn't have much of a story arc up to this point. We know she can sew, we know she can turn looks, she's an alternative queen, she isn't the most comfortable at comedy, but then other queens like Divina, Viv, Cheryl, and Blue have more fleshed out and clear narrative arcs so far. Speaking of queens who don't have fleshed out and clear narrative arcs, Vinegar and Something are in the bottom, and honestly it makes sense for Vinegar to leave on this challenge. She didn't do well the first look challenge, and despite being likable and funny, the edit was not trying to push her as any sort of threat or a queen that we're supposed to care about. Honestly, Vinegar, Something, and Crystal are the 3 queens left out of this 8 who aren't focused on a ton or given a lot of narrative substance. And, would you look at that? They're the next 3 to go, and they're all put in the bottom next to each other. There's a moment in episode 4, which is the Snatch Game, that made me a little confused. We see Blue Hydrangea, who flopped in the comedy acting challenge, be the dark horse of Snatch Game. We knew Baga would slay, we knew Viv would slay, but Blue doing an absolutely vulgar and hilarious Mary Berry impression was a shock. But it was a satisfying moment for a queen that we have grown to love, but who has sort of struggled to shine as well as we know she can. But then, in the moment, she's not given her flowers. Her and Cheryl are called as safe, but then before they leave for Untucked, Blue gets like sort of a mini critique that basically says she's in the top, but we don't get to see her on that main stage with the other tops and bottoms, and instead she's shipped off to Untucked. This was probably for 2 reasons. One, because her vulgar version of UK's sweetheart Mary Berry was definitely a controversial choice, and maybe would be best suited to just send off and not discuss too much in order to not upset certain audiences, kind of like etc. on Drag Race Down Under. Also because if Cheryl was going to be safe, she needed someone to interact with in Untucked. But it's disappointing because it would have been so nice to see Blue get her proper acknowledgement for the comeback that she had in this episode, and it would push her narrative forward a bit more than it did instead. So let's look at the tops. Baga and Viv, the besties, they both get the win, and sure. I mean, there's been a double win for Snatch Game before, back in Season 7, with both Kennedy Davenport's Little Richard and Ginger Minge's Adele, but this felt like a course correction for Baga after last episode's design challenge blunder. It's kind of like, she's a frontrunner, obviously. Don't even think about that dreadful outfit that we let slide. She just won Snatch Game, come on. But with this runway look, sure, Jan. Then we have a bottom three of Crystal, Divina, and Something. Some was obviously the worst. She had the look and the voice nailed down, but she just didn't have any jokes. So then the judges have to choose between Crystal and Divina for the other spot in the bottom two. Now, considering that they were the top two just an episode prior, this is quite a fall from grace for both of them. Now, Divina's Julia Child was fine. The voice was alright, the look was alright, but just like with Something, where are the jokes? Crystal had the look sort of there, the voice not so much, but she managed to get a solid joke in and make Rue cackle. Thanks, Syphilis. What about the runway looks? Oh, okay, so they were the two best of the week. Well, how do you choose then which one to put in the bottom? Crystal got more laughs than Divina and literally set her pussy on fire on the runway, but on the other hand, Divina is our comedy icon and viewpoint queen for the audience. So either one is probably going to send home Something, but do we really want to see Divina in the bottom so early? No, so Divina is saved, and Crystal lip syncs. Probably wouldn't be my choice, but it's not like Crystal got robbed blind or anything. So we lose Something, and she really plays into her, oh, I just didn't listen to anyone. If only I'd listened to people, in her final words, saying that's her biggest regret. But didn't she literally take Blue's advice on who to choose for her Snatch Game character in this very episode? That little storyline makes no sense, but whatever. We made it to the most iconic episode of the season. Just like this entire fandom with Drag Race Down Under, it's time to break up. Bye-bye. This episode is totally cut and dry. One team ate, the other team left us to starve. I think this easily could have been a Baga or a Divina solo win, but I'm happy to see that Blue gets that doggone badge finally, so I'm not complaining. I agree with all the choices in this episode, so instead I'm going to focus on some of the storylines at play here. Let's finally talk about everyone's bestie from Essex, Miss Hole, also my nickname from college. So Cheryl has had a rough ride so far. She was in the bottom three for the first 3 episodes, and she didn't escape the bottom because she was being pushed. She was just never that bad to warrant being in the bottom 2. So episode 4, she actually has a solid performance in Snatch Game, and that was the first time she wasn't in the bottom 3. And now, here we are. It's the girl group challenge. I mean, she's in a girl group. She's named after the member of a girl group. Her entire gig is girl groups. This is her moment to shine. But then, she's on the losing team. I mean, she is the best queen on that losing team, but it keeps her from finally getting that badge. Cheryl's storyline has been pretty all over the place. Episode 2, she's in a rivalry with Vivienne after Vivienne calls her out for being fake, and it puts her in a pretty sympathetic light to the audience. The edit does show her being a bit unaware of how she comes across at times, but it also shows us that she means well and isn't being intentionally rude or vicious. So when the other queens all come for her, we feel bad. We want to see her succeed, and just when we think this is finally her moment, it gets ripped away from both us and her. We also see some interesting development in both Baga and Viv's storylines. They have been set up as the best friends, the mean girls, the Regina and the Gretchen. But this episode, we see Bagga break away from that and see just how rude Viv can be when she's on the opposing side of her vitriol. Now, this is the part of Mean Girls when Gretchen becomes besties with Katie for a minute and gets all annoyed with Regina and spills all of her secrets. But alas, this doesn't last, and Regina gets hit by the bus in this episode, the metaphorical bus being Viv's spot in the bottom 2. The mean girl getting knocked down a peg, and from here on out, we see her in an entirely different light. Every episode following shows us new sides to Vivienne that we haven't seen before. From learning about her drug addiction to her close relationship with her mother, the edit from here on out does a better job of fleshing Vivienne out as a human being instead of just the villain on a reality show. And it all starts with her lip syncing for her life. The storytelling on the season is so good. And we're now in the era of Divina dominance. I mean, she's the new head bitch in charge. And 2 wins behind her belt have inflated her ego almost to the size of Vivienne's. As we now move on to the top 5 commercial challenge, Viv gets her 3rd win, all of which have been very deserving. And literally, her commercial was the only one I thought was a good commercial. I think these commercials, they sucked. You could make arguments for basically everyone outside of Viv as to why they could have been in the bottom. But they pin besties Cheryl and Blue next to each other in the bottom 2. And it makes sense narratively. They have been the 2 heroes on this journey the entire time. And Cheryl Hole now gets to perform in front of Cheryl Cole. I kind of think this was inevitable for her, but like I said, anyone besides Viv could be in the bottom, and I would be like, yeah, sure, I see it. But we lose our sweetheart Blue, and it's a really sad moment. I mean, she was the most lovable queen on the season, and I just wish we got to see her shine a bit more. So that leads us into our penultimate episode, The Makeover. And now, Vivienne has passed her villain torch completely to Bagga. These last 2 episodes show her absolutely no mercy in the edit. I mean, wow. Her whole situation with her mother, her wanting to give up the episode prior. This episode solidifies that Divina and Viv are our top 2 for sure. And I'm just going to say it. Cheryl Hole was robbed. I mean, this could have been it. Her huge comeback moment. Her and her sister had great chemistry. They looked adorable on the runway. The family resemblance was there. They slayed the choreo, but she gets put in the bottom. Michelle calls her out for wearing a bodysuit, but then praises Divina for wearing these frumpy, ill-fitting, ugly dresses. Bagga might have done the worst makeup job of the night, but Divina had the ugliest outfits, and it's not like her makeup was much better. I think the challenge win this episode was a fight between Vivienne and Cheryl, and it sucks seeing Cheryl thrown into the bottom on a challenge I thought she really excelled at. If we're talking about resemblance, there's no better duo than Cheryl and her sister. Also, I just want to point out, all the best makeover looks were by queens already cut at this point. I mean, we were robbed of seeing some of these looks compared to what the actual top 4 gave us. So, Bagga is finally put in the bottom to a song that's literally right up her alley, possibly the only song this whole season that was right up her alley, and she sends home Cheryl. Now, I don't have a ton of points to make about the finale. Bagga gets cut before the final lip sync, and after the assassination the edit did on her storyline the last 2 episodes, I'm not shocked. Divina and Viv are the top 2, and Vivienne wins. And I totally agree. Vivienne slayed every single episode of this season except for one. Her narrative arc was one of growth, and we saw more and more layers to her personality and story be revealed with every episode. I think a lot of the fandom forgave some of Divina's catty behavior towards the end of the season because she was set up from the start as a hero and the direct opposition to the plastics. But in reality, Viv and Divina both had their shady moments, their immature moments, and their genuinely sweet moments. They were two fully fleshed out reality show characters, and either one could have been wearing that crown. But I do think Vivienne had the better journey and the higher moments. Now, I do want to point out, before we wrap up this video, that anything negative I said about any of these queens is in relation to how they were edited for a highly edited TV show. I am sure they are all lovely people, and as always, I invite the cattiness and the villainous behavior because it makes for a great viewing experience. And I can separate their villainous moments for TV from them as real people. I advise you to do the same if you cannot. UK1 is such an incredible season. The rewatchability is high with this one. There are so many hilarious queens, genuine talent, shady moments, and iconic challenges. How they managed to top this season with UK2 is a mystery to me, but they somehow did it. Can they top themselves again, though, with UK3? Well, we're going to have to keep watching to solve that one. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe, and here are the links to all of my socials. Now, it has been a long day of solving the mystery of what the lady is made for if it's not for turning. I'll have to figure that one out. All right, guys, I will see you in the next one.